Hello, people of the internet. I'm going to assume, since you clicked on this video, that you have some interest in what the title says. Skepticism? What the heck is that? Or maybe you are thinking that sounds familiar, but you are curious as to where this interpretation might go. Well, I hope that you join me in this adventure either way. So, let's talk about skepticism. It is more of me talking at you, though, but I would like to think that you get my point. Hi, my name is Katie, and I'm a college student studying philosophy. I would like to add a brief disclaimer before we get into this video. I am not an expert in the field of philosophy. This is my interpretation and understanding of skepticism. I love philosophy and I love to talk about it, but I'm not going to assume that I know everything or 100% right. When I was first getting introduced into philosophy, the understanding that I had was that in philosophy you question everything. Now, this doesn't seem very productive, and I feel like this might be one of the reasons that philosophy gets a bad rap. If you question everything, how can you know anything at all for sure? What if we don't know anything at all? I want to come back to these questions, but let's get into what skepticism is. Being skeptic means that you doubt something, and in philosophy, the something that you are skeptic of usually relates to knowledge. If a person were to look at the sky and say, "I'm pretty sure it's going to rain," a skeptic might reply, "How are you sure?" "Well, it looks like it's going to rain." "Does it always rain when it looks like it will?" "Not always." "Then your eyes could be tricking you. It may be completely sunny out here, but you just can't see it." "My eyes seem to be just fine." "Well, are you certain that it's rain? What if it starts pouring cats and dogs?" Now, this example may sound silly, but this doubt is and has been a part of creating questions and trying to find answers about knowledge and knowing for thousands of years. When talking about philosophy, the old guys like Socrates and Plato come up a lot. Socrates is often thought of as the OG of Western philosophy. He once said, "All that I know is that I know nothing." That's very skeptic of him, isn't it? You would think that he did know things, but when he would go out and talk to people, he was always questioning even his own thoughts and ideas. Despite how hard he may have tried in his conversations with people, they never really got to a complete answer. I mean, Plato's Republic was all about justice and what it means, but 300 pages later, we still don't have a definition for justice. After all that effort, Socrates is still uncertain of what justice is. Maybe knowledge isn't possible at all. This is just one aspect of skepticism, which was adopted by students at Plato's Academy, who then formed what is called academic skepticism. The academics posed a series of problems to show what we think we know by our senses may be unreliable, and that we cannot be sure about the reliability of our reasoning. With our rain example from earlier, the skeptic is dubious about the person's vision and that they are seeing things correctly. We sometimes see things that are not there, or we think we see one thing when it is something different. The skeptic, like the academic skeptics, thinks that the senses are unreliable, so they cannot be trusted to provide knowledge. Another type of skepticism came about during ancient times as well. A man named Pyrrho of Elis became the poster boy for a type of skepticism about suspending judgment. He asserted that since his senses could not be relied on, we could never figure out anything about anything. Therefore, one way of life was just as good as any other. The key was not to be concerned about which one. Pyrrho was more focused on living a happy life. If something could be wrong when we think it is right, then it could lead to possible trouble and pain later. To avoid this possible pain, Pyrrho would not make a judgment if it was good or bad. That way he wouldn't have to worry about the pain. In this painting, Pyrrho and several other men are in a boat in a storm. He is the one in the middle, sitting calmly while everyone else runs about all crazy. Pyrrho doesn't know if the ship will sink in the storm or stay afloat, so he doesn't bother himself by worrying about it. Moving forward to the 1600s, a popular name is René Descartes. One of his most famous quotes is "Cogito ergo sum," or "I think, therefore I am." How did Descartes come to this idea? He was skeptical of his senses and the possibility of science. Science was supposed to provide knowledge, but if actual science wasn't possible, then neither was knowledge. This did not sit well with Descartes, so he set out to find something that he was certain of that would then be able to produce knowledge. From his doubt about his senses, him wondering whether he is dreaming, and the idea of him being deceived, the only thing that he was certain of was that he exists as a thing that thinks. He doubts if he has a body, but there is some part of him that exists which thinks. If he is thinking, He exists. Therefore, I think. Therefore, I am. Through skepticism, Descartes was able to come up with some element of certainty. Another philosopher from around the same time as Descartes was a Scottish man named David Hume. Let us look at one of his skeptical concepts by going back to our rain example from earlier. The skeptical person says, "What if it starts pouring cats and dogs?" This seems completely ridiculous. It has never rained cats and dogs before. But for Hume, cats and dogs falling from the sky is not impossible. Long before Hume, the ancient skeptics had recognized that inferences about future events cannot be made with certainty. They realized that there can be no demonstrative or deductive inference, say, from the past to the present to the future. Hume, however, posed a more profound difficulty. Are we justified in placing any degree of confidence in the conclusions to such inferences? The person infers that it will rain based on their experience from the past. This inference is inductive in that they think that the future will continue to be like the past. But past events do not always determine the future. Things change. For Hume, making the claim that it will rain because it has rained in the past is not enough to justify thinking it will rain. For all we know, the way weather works could completely change, and precipitation could be actual cats and dogs. This idea has been called Hume's problem of induction. These are just a small sampling of the variety in skepticism over its millennia-long history. But what is the point? At first glance, skepticism seems to be a waste of time. It is not productive for learning about knowledge unless you're Descartes. It can be scary too. If we do not know anything, what are we doing, and does anything matter? I think this is where skepticism is a bit misunderstood. The jump to existentialist dread is enticing, but there is value in skepticism. Socrates, the academics, and the Pyrrhonians all used skepticism to help them in their quest for actual knowledge. They first had to figure out what knowledge couldn't be, and then they worked from there. Descartes did something very similar in developing his cogito. The Pyrrhonians also used skepticism to live a happy life. If you do not worry or care about what is good or bad, you can make the most out of whatever happens. Hume, on the other hand, recognized that in order to live a normal life, you must set skepticism aside. Even though he admits this point, he still sees skepticism as valuable. Barry Stroud is a more contemporary philosopher than the others that we discussed, but he holds a similar view of skepticism. While the points and arguments made through a skeptical lens may be outrageous or ludicrous, Stroud does not think that they should be thrown out altogether. I think skepticism in epistemology, the study of knowledge, now represents, and perhaps always did represent, the possibility that an explanation or a complete account of knowledge is impossible. We cannot consider all our knowledge of the world all at once and still see it as knowledge. The absurdity that comes out in skepticism shows where problems exist in our understanding of knowledge and where some more work needs to be done to clarify those problems. So, what is the upshot of skepticism? It is a way to be critical and think about the things we think we know and understand, and the ways we live our lives. It is part of the reason I became so interested in philosophy. Sure, I may not know everything, and there may be things I cannot know, but that doesn't stop me from trying. Thank you for joining me in this adventure. I hoped you enjoyed the ride. I know I did.